Well, we're going to turn our attention to the Word for a little bit here. So if you got a Bible nearby, you can pull it out of the couch cushions next to you. It's not in the pew rack in front of you. It's somewhere else these days. Little Liam showed up at our house on Friday and with his mom and, family. But he was there, and one of the things that was so fun about Liam is that he just wants you next to him. And he was exploring the garage. We had both garage doors open, and he was walking around. And as soon as he got to the front of Deb's car, he was going to be out of sight of me. And so he just kind of stopped at the corner of the car, looking back. And his verbal skills, being as he's a year and a half old, are limited, to say the least. And he doesn't really have any words. He has sounds and he has motions with his hands, but he kind of stood at the edge of the car and was going, whatever he was doing. I'm not sure what he said, but I got the point. And it was, Grampy, you got to come over here and walk with me, because I'm going into the other side of the car, and I don't know what's over there, and it's away from you, and I just need you with me. And so I'd go over and then we'd shuffle around the front of the car, and we'd go around the back side, and we'd end up out back in the driveway, and then he'd go in again, and he'd get to that corner, and it was still this scary little corner. I just can't get past the front of Grammy's car because I'm alone, and I need somebody with me. And that's true for all of us. We just need somebody with us. It's scary to go around the backside of whatever we're going around the backside of alone. And so God has promised that He'd be with us. And today's story is going to tell us a little bit more about His presence in our lives. So, we're in the book of Daniel, if you want to turn there. We've been working our way down through the Old Testament, and we're a little bit past Psalms and Proverbs today in the book of Daniel. And we're not going to look at Daniel directly. We'll see him on the way by, but we'll do another whirlwind tour through the book. Daniel chapter 1, we see in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And so here we have Nebuchadnezzar, who is coming along, and he is taking over Judah, so that the new king is Nebuchadnezzar now. And he sets up his kingdom, and one of the things that he does as the new king is he says, give me the best out of Judah, give me the best leadership people out of Judah, and I'm going to take them back to my kingdom, and we're going to train them and teach them and help them to be all that I need them to be. And so out of that pulling of the best, the coolest and bravest and strongest and smartest, came Daniel and a couple of his friends, who were renamed Shadrach, Mishach, and Abednego. So all these young men came and were given special food, and we go through that story where they decided they'd rather have God's food than the cool food of the king. And of course, the food of God, the vegetables that they were used to, made them stronger and brighter. And so, the king said, okay, you can have your own food. And we get to chapter 2, and Nebuchadnezzar, the king now, has a dream. And in this dream, he's confused and worried, and he's up all night anxious about it. So he calls in his smart guys, his team of, I don't know, what did he call them? He called them astrologers, I think. And he calls them in verse 5 of chapter 2. The king replied to the astrologers, this is what I've firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I will have you cut into pieces and your houses turned into piles of rubble. So the king was a powerful guy, and he didn't put up with a lot of guff. So he told his advisors, his teachers, he said, I want you to come and not only interpret the dream for me, but I want you to tell me what the dream was. What was I dreaming about? So obviously the interpreters could have taken a good shot at, okay, that dream might mean this, but when he asked them to tell him what his dream was, they were out of luck. And they basically said, we can't do that. Nobody can do that. And so we get down to verse 12 in that same chapter 2. This made the king so angry and furious that he ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree was issued to put the wise men to death, and men were sent to look for Daniel and his friends to put them to death. Well, that's not good news for Daniel and his buddies. So the king's guard comes out to them, and he pushes them to say, you're going to get all destroyed because the king had a dream and he can't figure it out, and you guys couldn't interpret for him. And apparently Daniel wasn't involved in this original account, because when Daniel hears about this, he makes a response. So Daniel, down in chapter 2, verse 18, he says, he urged them to plead for mercy from the God of heaven to his friends concerning this mystery, so that he and his friends might not be executed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. During the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Then Daniel praised the God of heaven and said, praise be to the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. He deposes kings and raises up others. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. This would be good encouragement for little Liam. He knows what dwells on the other side of Grammy's car. He knows that. I thank and praise you, verse 23, God of my ancestors, you have given me wisdom and power. You have made known to me what we asked of you. You have made known to us the dream of the king. And so Daniel goes to the king after he gets a little leniency about wiping out all the wise men in the kingdom. And he tells the king a bit about his dream and about the interpretation of it. So we zoom down to verse 31 of that chapter 2. It says, your majesty looked, and there before you stood a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were all broken to pieces and became like chaff on the threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. This was the dream, and now I will interpret it to the king. Your majesty, you are the King of kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. In his hands he has placed all mankind and the beasts of the field and the birds of the sky. Wherever they live, he has made you ruler over them all. You are that head of gold. It sounds pretty good, except if you look at the whole dream, the head of gold was eventually going to be destroyed. And his kingdom was going to be replaced by another kingdom, the bronze kingdom, and another kingdom. And so from Nebuchadnezzar's perspective, I'm sure he was sort of okay with it, but, I'm glad that I'm the head, and I'm the gold, and I'm the King of kings, and I'm ruling over everything, but it's not going that well for me. In the end, I lose. Going down, we're going to skip down a couple verses to verse 47. The King Nebuchadnezzar hears the interpretation and the dream. He knows it's right. And he says to Daniel, surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you were able to reveal this mystery. So Nebuchadnezzar acknowledges, wow, your God is awesome. Your God is amazing. Just to follow that line for a moment, the movement of a heart to God is not always a straight linear path. It's not always one step after another. And sometimes we go closer and then we go farther away. And So we find that happening with King Nebuchadnezzar. In fact, if you flip over just a little bit to chapter 3, verse 13, we get to another point in the life of King Nebuchadnezzar when he's not happy. In verse 13, he says, "Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Mishach, and Abednego. So they were brought before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar said to them, Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up?" And he got mad. He was ripped. What happened to my God? So Nebuchadnezzar, at one point, when Daniel's interpreting a dream, he's going, "Yes, your God is awesome. I love your God. He's the King of kings, God of gods, God of even the lords of the earth." So he acknowledged him, but then just a little bit further down, he goes, "Nah, yeah, you won't worship my God, then I'm going to get rid of you." And then verse 28 of chapter 3, if you turn over just maybe a page further, verse 28 of chapter 3 says, "Then Nebuchadnezzar said, 'Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command, and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God.'" And Nebuchadnezzar comes back around, and he's, "Yeah, wow, this is great. Your God is the awesome God, the one God." And he's convinced of it. Well, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of timeline for Nebuchadnezzar, because by the end of chapter 4, he's out of the picture. But as he comes to the end of chapter 4, we see in verse 37 of chapter 4, this is the last words we have recorded here, "Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven, because everything he does is right, and all his ways are just. And those who walk in pride, he is able to humble." Now, from where Nebuchadnezzar started, that's quite a journey. And for me, it just highlighted the fact that, as we see people moving toward God, and then we see people moving away from God, and we hope that they come back around. And I know that there are situations in your life, in my life, where I say, "Man, I'm just trusting you, God, that you'll bring them back around, that you'll convince them again that you are the God of gods, the King of kings." Well, that was kind of a sidelight on the way through, because I really want to talk about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego today. So we're going down back to chapter 3, verse 1, and we're going to read through chapter 3. "King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon." If you look at your inspired footnotes there, you probably can see that that's 90 feet high. That's like a 8-story building up there. And it's this giant statue that Nebuchadnezzar put together. I wonder where we got the idea of a giant statue. Maybe from that dream, huh? He had the dream about a giant statue, head of gold. He was the head. That was cool. And the body was of a different material, and the legs of a different material. He makes it all gold, all the way to the bottom. I think maybe he was trying to say, "Oh yeah, God, I'm the gold statue all the way down. I'm going to last forever. I'm going to be the one. I'm the man." So Nebuchadnezzar builds this statue. And he summons the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image he had set up. Man, he has a pile of folks there, doesn't he? Everybody who's important, everybody who's anybody is showing up to the dedication of this image. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, and magistrates, and all the other provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. There they are, the whole crowd, standing in front of this 90-foot statue. And they're looking up at it, and they're all impressed, and it's cool, and it's covered with gold. And then the herald, in verse 4, loudly proclaimed, "Nations and peoples of every language, this is what you are commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace." Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and all kinds of music, all the nations and peoples of every language fell down and worshipped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Now we know, we've read this story, I'm sure most of us have heard this more than once. We know that not everybody did bow down. And perhaps it was because they were off the center of attention. Maybe they were in a corner somewhere. Maybe they were up against the wall of some building. I don't know. How did they get missed here? But not everybody bowed down. And so we move on to the story and hear what happens to the ones who didn't bow down. At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. So there's a couple of things going on here. The astrologers, remember, were the ones who couldn't do the interpretation and started the ruckus that got everybody in trouble who was a wise man. And Daniel was the one who got him out of it, and he was a Jew. And so the astrologers already don't like the guys. And they're from another place, another country. They don't understand. They don't like him. And then they hear that, because Daniel did a great job, he gets, promoted. And they don't get promoted, of course. They almost get killed. And so they're kind of grumpy, maybe a little jealous, maybe of what Daniel and his friends are doing. So they said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "May the king live forever. Your Majesty has issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold, and that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews who you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Mishach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, your Majesty. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up." Now, it's interesting that in this list we have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but we don't have Daniel. Where's Daniel? We don't know exactly. Daniel might have been out of town for all we know. Maybe he's over in Judah working on something for the king. But whatever happened in this moment, these guys, these astrologers had noticed the trio, the three amigos who would not bow down. Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now, when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good." It's obvious that the king's really he doesn't really want to destroy these guys. He's like, "I'll give you another chance. Here's your opportunity. I'm going to make the music happen, and you can bow down now. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace." So you see, it's an important decision here, boys. You got to figure it out. "Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" What a great line. What God would be able to rescue you from my hand? You remember the story of, back there in the dream, and he's the head of gold, and this whole statue gets destroyed by the stone that's not cut by human hands. Now, I'm pretty sure that we could figure out who that is. That's the Lord himself. Destroying this kingdom, multiple kingdoms, destroying them. And he's looking back at that, and he says, yeah, God is good back there, and God is powerful back there, and I almost got it right, and then I got it wrong, and I'm just mad about this. I think I'm still the most important thing. So, what God could possibly rescue you? Well, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, "King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it. And he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." Well, this is the centerpiece of this little discussion here. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego say, okay, there is a God who can save us from this furnace. He is more than able to set us out of this disaster, to free us from that, to protect us in the midst of it, to do whatever is necessary to keep us whole. Our God is strong enough to do that. That's a great place for us to stop and recognize when we start going through the tough times, to say, do I really believe my God is able to do what's necessary to get me out of this disaster? Do I really, really trust God to be strong enough? We talk about it, we reflect on it occasionally, but sometimes we doubt it. God's not going to do it. I don't need to go to prayer because God's not going to get me out of this. I need to work at it. I need to figure it out. I need to design a solution. I need to get better or wiser or smarter. Or I need to do something to fix this problem. Prayer and inviting God in, maybe I'll do that too, okay? I'm going to do the work, and I'll invite God in so that he can help out. And Shadrach, Mishach, and Abednego were convinced from the first line of their response, our God can do this. Here we are in front of a furnace. Now, there's logic involved here. There's a furnace there. It's not far down the hill from where I'm standing with the king. There's a furnace down there. It's very hot, and if I'm thrown in there, there's a good chance from the physics perspective, Dave and I were talking physics earlier this morning, from a physics perspective, I'm not going to make it. And so, would God override physics? Yeah, he could. He built physics. He built the world. He built what is here. And so he put it all together. Could he disassemble it for a moment? He could. He could. And they were confident enough to start with the idea that God is more than enough for the situation I face. And we are yielded to him. Their second line here in this passage was that the God is able to deliver us, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. Our God might get us out of the furnace, but either way, he's going to get us out of your hand. Now that's obviously true. They're either going to be saved because the king's going to change his mind, or they're going to be saved because God does a miracle, or they're going to be saved because they're going to go home and be with their dad. It's going to be over. They're going to be saved from the hand of the king. There's a lot of solutions out there, a lot of possibilities on how this will work out, and I'm not sure, they weren't sure, how God is going to answer the prayer that I bring. Could it be that I'm healed, God, if I'm sick? Yeah, it could be that you're healed. Could it be a miraculous healing? Absolutely. Could it be a healing because the doctors get smart and find a solution? Yeah, it could be that kind of a healing. Could it be a healing because at the end of the sickness, I'm going home and I will no longer be part of this world? Yeah, because that's still a healing. It's still a solution to the issue. We often kind of figure out what we think the solution ought to be. And I don't think God's upset about that. I don't think he's worried that we've invented our own solution, but he needs us to trust him and say, it doesn't matter, God. How you work it out is what's right. How you work it out is the best. And I trust you in that. Do you trust him? Whatever the situation is, do you trust him in that? I think about little Liam going by that car, and he's looking over on the dark side of the car, and I'm sure at some point he's like, I don't know what's over there, and I'm not sure it's going to work like it did last time. Although he just went around the loop about 45 seconds ago, but he's still not confident. He's not confident enough to do it without God. And so he looks at the dark side and goes, I don't know. I need a hand. And that's what these guys were saying too. Shadrach, Mishach, and Abednego said, God is going to be with us. He will free us from your hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know that we're just going to serve you. So Nebuchadnezzar was furious. He cranks up the furnace. He gets these guys down there. They're hauling them into the furnace, and the people around are dying just to get them into the furnace. The thing is 7 times as hot as it should have been. And so the king's command was urgent. The furnace was hot. The soldiers were killed, and they were, verse 23, and 3 men firmly tied fell into the furnace. And verse 24, King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement. What's going on down there in my furnace? And asked his advisors, weren't the 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? They replied, certainly, your majesty. He said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed. And the 4th looks like a son of the gods. Amazing, amazing picture. And so he looks down there and he sees Shadrach, Mishach, and Abednego. All the soldiers had died on their way in. They were still outside the furnace, but dead because of the heat. And Shadrach, Mishach, and Abednego are in the furnace, and there's somebody else there with him. Who? Well, our text leaves it a little bit open. This one that looked like, had the appearance of a son of the gods. Kind of generic. Maybe it's because Daniel didn't know that it was the Messiah. That's my stab at it. I think it was the Messiah. It could have been an angel, or it could have been Jesus himself, who was walking in the fire, pre-incarnate before he had come. He was existing from the beginning of time, and maybe that was just Jesus walking with him in the fire. What a cool adventure that must have been, huh? Or a hot adventure, I guess. Wouldn't have been a cool adventure, but a hot adventure. So God shows up, literally, physically shows up in a way that they can see tangibly in the midst of the disaster. Protection from the fire and the companionship of God himself in the midst of the battle. What an amazing picture. So when we're in the midst of whatever storms and fires and battles we're in the midst of, when we call out to God, we can know with confidence that God will be with us. God will be there in the fire. And that should bring us a great peace, that no matter what we face, no matter how it looks, no matter how difficult it gets, God, I'll be okay, because you'll be with me. So when you're standing in the front of Grammy's SUV and you wonder if you can make it around the backside, just reach out, make whatever sound you can, even if it's just, God, I need you to be with me. And he'll come, delighted to walk with you in the fire of life. It's a great story, great story. So I hope that we can take out of this the fact that God is big enough and strong enough to carry us through whatever battle, that whatever the result is, whatever the end is, it's okay. God will take care of us in the way that God wants to take care of us. And finally, he'll be with us in the storm. And maybe on Nebuchadnezzar's behalf, let's be patient with each other as we come closer to God, because the path isn't always straight. May God bless you this week. Enjoy. Amen. Amen.